reason I say that that is exciting for me is because that allows me to then do my job more effectively, because I then know how to better serve young people. I know what they want. I know the challenges that they're going through. I can try to understand those challenges more effectively, and I can try help to explain those challenges to His Excellency, the President, to other cabinet ministers about what young people are wanting to see change. And not what I've been extremely impressed about with young people recently is about a year ago, we held our youth indaba. And at that youth indaba, I kept saying to the team, I don't want to just hear complaints. I don't want to hear complaints. I want to hear solutions. So if someone comes with a complaint or a challenge, tell me what their solution is or how they're going to be a part of the solution. And what I've seen recently change is I had Global Shapers, a youth organization that came through to my office at the beginning of the week, and they had held a big a workshop, a sort of town hall with about 300 youth. And they came with their different recommendations that came out of it. But then they came with an action plan to say, and this is what we're going to do about it. And that was really one of the first times that someone has done that. And so I'm really excited to see in this report is that it's not just a report saying these are the challenges, but the recommendations. For me, that was actually the first. I flipped all the way to the back and read through all the recommendations because that's what will lead my ministry and again, what will allow my ministry to better do our jobs more effectively so that we can ensure that the next generation of youth are not just empowered, but they have platforms in which to drive policies. And that is something that I think we have been missing a little bit. That's something that I know one of the common themes that I've heard recently has been how do youth get more involved with the day-to-day policies. We have ideas. We want to bring you ideas. We want to be a part of the solution. And for me, that is so exciting and so encouraging for the ministry. So I want to thank all of the organizations in here that are working directly with young people. Please keep going, keep bringing their voices to the table. Make sure that you and them are being heard. Thank you to the British Council for doing this research. It's extremely invaluable. It's, again, work that I will be able to use, work that I'll be able to keep very close to my heart in terms of giving directives also to other ministries, because I have other ministries coming and asking advice in terms of how do we talk or how do we get young people involved in different programs. And this is a really great way. It spoke a lot about education and it spoke a lot about technology. And that is the way in which this world is going. We have to be giving our youth something different and something that is not just going to see them through the next year or two, but really set them up for the next 10, 15, 20 years. I know as a ministry that's what we're focusing on with our vocational training centers. We've been having different conversations around how do we upgrade our facilities so that they are technology driven. I'm terrible at most technology, so I know I'll even learn a few things when it comes to different computers. But simple things. If we take one of our courses in our VTCs, which is mechanics, most of our mechanics are still working old school, which is great. It's good to know the old school. But you come into town or you go overseas or you go to a next door country and you want to get a job, you've got to know how to work the computer that plugs into the car that tells you what the heck's wrong with it. And I didn't know we even could do that, but apparently that's what we need to do. And so those are the kinds of technologies that we now need to implement to ensure that our young people not just lead us into this next generation, but leap us forward. I think as Zimbabwe, we all know the challenges that we faced over the past few years, and we are now having to not just catch up to everybody, but I really want to challenge everyone in this room that we are leapfrogging. We want to leapfrog back to not where we were, but ahead of where we were. We want to encourage our young people to be vocal, tell people what they want to see, what they want to hear, but also tell us how you want to be a part of those solutions and how you want to be a part of driving this country forward. So thank you very much. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to physically launch the report, but I'm very excited about the report. And as I said, it's really going to be, it's a good piece of work that is going to be aligning with a lot of our programs, and it's going to be allowing me to do my job and make my job a lot easier. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Honourable Kirsty Coventry. Could you please just give her another warm round of applause? Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. You spoke of the importance of going beyond just doing studies and using this piece of work to influence policy, to influence program development. I think this is very, very critical. And when I also went through this particular report, quite excited also about the huge volume of recommendations that you will find. I'll not get into so many of them now because we'll have Dr. Dube preempted. He's going to be coming and give us.
Hello, I'm Roland Davis and I'm Director of the British Council in Zimbabwe, and I want to briefly introduce to you today the Next Generation report that we've just completed and we're about to launch this January. Next Generation is a research program that we conduct around the world on a regular basis in many countries across Asia, South America and Sub-Saharan Africa. Next Generation is really about understanding what young people think, what young people want. It's a research into their ambitions, their goals, their aspirations, but also some of the challenges that they see. We very much encourage people, whether you're in government, you're in the private sector, you're any kind of organisation that works with young people, perhaps in education, to really look at what this report says. There is ambition, there is certainly aspiration, there is hope, but there's a very clear-sighted view from young people about what the challenges are and some of the frustrations that they feel. So it's a really grounded view of what young people actually say and want, and too often the voice of young people is ignored. But here's an example, a very clear voice for young people. So whatever organisation you're involved in, if you're interested in what young people have to say, we very much encourage you to read it and to think about how you might respond as an organisation. That's certainly what we are doing in the British Council. So I really commend this report to you.
As a team from Ali Douglas, we are humbled to have been selected to undertake this very great initiative, and we are glad with the output that we see. It's very different from what we have in the computer, though. It's very, very nice, I should say. Thank you very much to the British Council for that. So, I think most of you have seen the report. It's right before you. My job is a very simple one, to give you a basic overview of what is before you and what you'll be reading, I hope, through this week, and trying to understand some of the things that we came up with in this report. So we had short presentation. I don't know if it is up. Okay. In this presentation, generally, I'm going to give you a brief overview of what transpired. First of all, as we were undertaking the research, what we found out. It's going to be full of some sentiments and perspectives that were given by young Zimbabweans, which most of my team happened to be young Zimbabweans. I was a member of a very strong team, I think, that did this work. Myself, Ngobizita Dube, and I'm with my colleagues here, not all of them, but they are sitting the second table there. Maybe they should stand up so that everyone sees them. So maybe Tulani Moyo, he's our project guy. Mrs. Mjuru, give them a round of applause, please. Mrs. Mjuru does our admin. Tabisani Ngwenya does our statistics and everything that has got equations. Dr. Mkokelis Tuole, he's the development studies guy. The other three colleagues who unfortunately could not be with us, but they contributed immensely as well to this work. So I'm not here alone. I'm representing a very broad team that also put work into this. So, to begin with, Can you go to the next slide? All right, so the director has already noted that such research is done in a number of countries, and it is done usually when there are transitions and major changes in the particular societies that we're talking about. So you are all aware that we went through a phenomenal change, I think. It should have been phenomenal. And we are still in a transition sort of period. So it was very essential to try and understand how young people who were catapulted into the limelight due to this change generally felt about things, what they thought about the future, and how they saw themselves in their space in the new Zimbabwe that is being created. So this was the general perspective and the rationale for this research. Now, the major questions that we sought to answer in this research were as follows, and I think you also can look at them on the report itself. We wanted to understand if young people feel they had a stake in the social and political landscape of Zimbabwe. That's the first thing. So we hope that as you read the report, you'll be able to get an answer to that. Second, do they have hopes and aspirations, and what are they? Do they have dreams regarding their country? Third, do young people in Zimbabwe have an appetite for social change within their generation? Do young people in Zimbabwe feel they have a voice? Is their voice being heard by their elders, by their leaders, by the media, and anyone who's influential who at least should hear them? And finally, what is their engagement in civil, economic, social, and democratic life of their country? What is it that they do? So as you go through the report, I want you to keep reflecting on these questions, because these are the major questions that we wanted to answer. We hope that they have been adequately answered, and they generally paint a picture of what the young Zimbabwean in all parts of the country generally thinks regarding these issues that we've highlighted here. Now, briefly, how did we do it? So this was a very demanding and broad study because it had to cover the whole country. So we had to cover the whole country and did cover the whole country. Our country is divided into 8 general provinces and 2 metropolitan provinces. That makes it 10. So we made sure that we covered all the general provinces, looking at the urban areas in the general provinces and the rural areas as well in the general provinces. And then in the metropolitan provinces, we deliberately had 3 different sort of bases, which I think you'll see in the next slide. We made sure we covered the areas that had high density populations, medium density populations, and low density populations. The argument was people see things from a very different perspective depending on where they live in an urban center. So we wanted to make sure we get as much voices and as much of a representative set of perspectives as possible. We knew that it would be impossible to get all the information from just a survey. So we decided to increase the methods of data collection. Instead of just running a questionnaire and asking people questions related to what you do and what, we decided to have deep interviews with young people as well. You'll see quotations that we threw in there that show what they thought and what they said about specific things. And to do this, we had specific key informant interviews with people who we thought were representatives of young people. We had a lot of assistance from the youth task force. Please clap hands for them. Yeah, they assisted a lot in that perspective, and they organized young people in their specific areas of influence. And then we also, it's not easy to get people to speak, particularly when you are talking to them face to face. So we had some quite innovative methods. We used what we call audio diaries, where we gave people some recorders to go and talk to certain issues at their own time, in their spare time at night and so on. And we got a lot of revealing information regarding the ways in which they saw things. We also had group discussions, and we also had secondary data which we accessed from various platforms. So it actually increased the size of our sample to almost about 2,800, right? 2,800 young people, plus the survey respondents. So this data coming together gives you quite a good perspective of what people think, not only from a quantitative questionnaire perspective, but also rich, deep, qualitative perspectives that people feel and what people think. I think the archives are with the British Council for any future reference, but I think there are a lot of interesting stories that came out from that. I've already highlighted that what we did in the metropoles, how we selected, and I think I also noted that in the other provinces we made sure we're the rural place, a largely rural area and a largely urban area. so that we get the different perspectives with respect to the geographical divide as well. And in the selection of words, I've already highlighted what we did. So, you'll find this, I think, in the annex. If you're interested in methodological issues, at least it will allow you to judge the research as something that was done scientifically. Now, moving on to the results and what we actually found out. First of all, how was the distribution of the respondents? As I've already said, we covered all the provinces. You'll notice that we focused on the populations between 18 to 35, but you'll see on the report, I think it's on page 3, that we focused more on the younger parts of the overall sample. So we've got the ages 18 to 24 dominating most of the provinces. And we tried to have a slight bias towards females, even though we ensured that we get a general perspective of everyone. Our guidance regarding the gender divide was based on the 2012 population census. So that was the general divide, that is the difference between males and females, and those were the general demographics of the respondents in the study area. Now regarding education, which was the first area that we looked at, young Zimbabweans generally find themselves in a very difficult socio-economic environment where making a living is constrained by numerous factors. I think we know this already. And the challenges of making a living generally manifest in the lack of employment and the informal employment that is generally more dominant and more notable in Zimbabwean society. So regarding education, you'll notice that when we get to the first graph that you see there is showing you the different levels of education with respect to the quality of education, i.e. primary education, no education, all the way to postgraduate university studies. So we noted that this higher or quality education was more common in the urban areas and also more common amongst males. I don't think that is new. But what was interesting is we argued that the major reason for this, or the notable reason for this, was first of all, the geographical divide had remnants in the colonial legacy that the country has, where development was skewed towards the urban areas. So we still see a lot of that. And there is a general tendency where the patriarchy, the institution of patriarchy is still very strong. So females tend to a certain extent, to value ideals of marriage ahead of education. So you'll find that from the findings that we had, you'll see some quotations. We had a number of young women in Zimbabwe saying, I'm better off married than educated. It is easier for me to have a better life if I'm married. But at the same time, that was also a vulnerability challenge, because some ended up using the marriage as an option, but some were forced into it due to the challenges of livelihoods and so on. As a result, did not get the education that they deserved. So we saw a lot of that, and we argued that these skews that you see with respect to gender, with respect to the geography, are related to the colonial legacy, related to the institution of patriarchy as well. However, the reasons for not being educated again, you'll notice that they will follow the different age groups as well. It's the older people, the older young people, 35, generally were in a better position than those who were young, which is expected, because we expect that they understand things at a better level. Now regarding employment, so we looked at employment from 3 different levels. Those young people who were formally employed, those young people who were informally employed, and those young people who were unemployed and dependent. So regarding employment, we were also interested in understanding the differences between informal employment and informal enterprise, which were 2 different things. Informal employment, we argued that was a result of someone failing to get a job, but they want to get a job. So the presence of informal employment does not necessarily mean the presence of enterprise. It actually is pointing to the failure to get a job and the challenges of unemployment. So we found that most young people actually find themselves informally employed, meaning they wish they could get a job. But because they cannot get a job, they end up doing anything else. This we found very important because it allows you to distinguish those people who are interested in entrepreneurship and those people who are just struggling from unemployment. So you'll find that there is a lot or more young people who were informally employed than young people who were involved in informal enterprise. What does this mean? There is an entrepreneurial spirit, but it is not strong as the need to find employment, which is not a bad thing, but the challenge is there are not many employment opportunities. As a result, you find that very few young people are in the yellow, that is formally employed. And most of those that are formally employed are those in the upper ceilings of the young people. We expect that they've got a lot of experience, they've got this and that. And then those that are informally employed will generally be more. But when you try to, then there's a significant group that is unemployed and dependent. And mostly it is the younger ones, but there was a significant point there where most of them were still in school. So there was a general positive culture towards education in Zimbabwe. In most cases, as an option against unemployment. Instead of not doing anything, I'd rather be in school. So there was a lot of people who were in that position from the 25 to 30 and from the 31 to 35. So we also looked at the unemployment issues with respect to different population groups. Zimbabwe is a diverse country with multiple populations and demographics based on origin. You've got Zimbabweans of European descent, Asian descent. You've got Zimbabweans of different sexual preferences. You've got Zimbabweans of different religions and so on and so on. So we try to zoom into that by having specific deep discussions with these people who we could find through snowballing. And some of them were able to also partake in our questionnaire. And you'll find that employment, though was not common, as you have already seen in the first graph, was highly common in certain population groups, particularly Zimbabweans of Asian descent, Zimbabweans of a mixed race, Zimbabweans of European descent. They had higher chances of formal employment in comparison, for instance, to native African Zimbabweans and disabled Zimbabweans. So you'll see a lot of that. And it explains generally the ways in which people have got access to formal employment, not meaning that formal employment is the best form of employment that is available. All right, now, looking at issues of navigating the world, how we understand aspects of interacting with the globe and everyone, we thought it was critical to understand our place in the world from a technological or a navigation perspective. And we found that generally most Zimbabweans had access to the internet. The graph there shows you the ability to access internet and those don't access internet. The majority of young Zimbabweans have got access to the internet. They've got access to the internet, but because of the device that I already highlighted, you'll note that the access to the internet is more towards the urban areas, provinces that have got large urban centers. And there is a danger, despite the high levels, for instance, the national average of 79, which we found, there is a danger that it's still not enough. There's still a significant number of Zimbabweans who do not have access to the internet. And given what is happening now, the fourth industrial revolution that is probably going to be based on data, there could be a significant number of Zimbabweans, young Zimbabweans who would be left behind. We're moving into a future where technological unemployment is becoming real, where we are no longer sure that the jobs that we have are going to be relevant in the next 50 years, where we are worried that machines are going to start trading with each other and we might see the birth of a useless class of humans. So we hope that those people are not left behind and they end up being in the useless class. What does this mean? We need to invest strongly into areas where we can identify and develop skills in issues such as coding, communication through new methodologies in order to remain relevant in this new era. So there is really need to reflect on the sort of employment opportunities that we're pursuing and if at all they're relevant to what is happening. Now, next slide, please. Then now, we also considered aspects of the various ways in which people access information, media. So naturally, because of the device that I highlighted before, the common ways of accessing information still remain the radio and the television. And this is usually mostly because of the dominant rural population. We also noted that print media is generally dying. Very few people access print media. And there is very limited use of modern media in comparison to the traditional forms of media, particularly the radio and the television. And this is generally the source of current affairs. When it comes to issues related to to external ideas, this is where we have the internet and other forms of media dominating. I think you'll see that as well. Now, regarding the relationship that we have, we're still navigating the world with other countries. Most young Zimbabweans identify with popular culture from particularly the UK. I think because it is, I don't want to say the colonial authority, but because the UK and the USA. Well, naturally, because I think we are highly exposed to information from the UK, we're highly exposed to the English language, and we saw most of them preferring to live and understand the world from the paradigm of the United Kingdom and the United States. I don't know if that is a good thing, but that is what is happening. It is mostly dominant, particularly in the urban areas, but it is also present in the rural areas. There is also a high affiliation for South Africa, Canada, Australia, interestingly, Japan and Germany. But you'll notice that the affiliation is common, particularly in the Commonwealth countries. And they are the outliers such as Germany and Japan for some reason. We did not go deeper into understanding the reasons why, but we thought maybe it was also because of the similarities of the Western culture, except maybe for Japan. So I think that was it on navigating the world. Now, the interesting one, which I don't know if it is fortunate or unfortunate, but Zimbabweans are highly interested in the political story. We also went on to try and understand the politics of the day. You'll notice in the report that we give a general overview, a preamble of the way the governance of the country has been structured, how things have come about. We give a brief history of how young people have been involved in the politics from the founding of the country to this day. We gave a bit about the people who are now the older generation, what they did when they were younger, and we tried to juxtapose this with what is happening now. And we noted that, unfortunately, over the years, young people have been used as cogs in the political debate and often put out there to deal with and be used for certain political issues. Then we went on to ask the young people what they thought about this after giving our hypothesis. And what did we get? I will give certain perspectives verbatim as they gave them. The first one says, do not ask me about Zimbabwe. I do not know Zimbabwe, but I know Lupane. Lupane is my home, and I don't want to trade it for any other place. So, when you ask about politics, which was national, there were a significant number of young people who resonated with local politics rather than the national politics. They were more interested in what was happening in their local space. It was not a bad thing, but it showed a certain detachment with the nation, which points to the national project itself. How is it really a national project that brings people as a united force, or it is a national project that still leaves a lot of fragmentation? So we thought that highlighted a certain level of fragmentation. That means there should be need to do some work in trying to unite young people and make sure that they see themselves as one nation. For some of us, it is as if we do not live in Zimbabwe because we don't see any benefits from the government. When it comes to jobs and opportunities, it is always youth and Mashonaland that benefit. We're surviving on things we get in our community, and this community has supported us very well, but not Zimbabwe. Same perspective. Very similar perspectives. And then the youth are at war with the community. These days, there is no love in the community because of poverty. It makes people hate each other and not show each other love. So instead of the youth helping in the community, they bring problems. So this was a different perspective that actually showed that, yes, There is understanding of all of us as a singular community, but the economic challenges that bedevil us tend to separate us even more than they unite us. So the economy stood out as a very critical challenge in discussing or talking about the Zimbabwean political space. So you'll notice even in the report, most of the aspects which go out as politics are actually economics. All right? All right. So we went on to say, okay, fine. If it is that way, what therefore do you feel about the support that you get as young people? So you'll notice that, interestingly, despite those challenges, most young Zimbabweans generally felt that they got a lot of community support, which is the first bars that you get there. A number were neutral, a number felt they're not supported, and fewer were neutral. So the fact that there is still a general connection with the community and a general feeling of support within the community I think is a good thing. That actually allows for building and allows for pointing and issues of the national project, bringing people together. And what did they think? Now, they linked the ideas of the community to aspects that they enjoyed, art, things that they felt maybe were disconnected from their parents. And one of the participants said, I wish most parents would accept us. If a child loves dancing, that is who they are. If I wish to be a dancer, I should be supported in that regard. So in the report, we made arguments that our education system has been overly academic, focusing mostly on training the child from the neck upwards. So from the time you are born, you are only trained from the neck upwards, and as you grow up, slightly to one side, and usually to one ear, and that's it. So we tend to be people who are focused on one particular side, making us very, what would I call it? We're not holistic, I think. So in the report, we argued that there's been efforts in dealing with the curriculum, but we thought it is critical to train the whole child. Allow them to be, allow them to dance, allow them to sing, allow them to play, but also encourage the communities to recognize such things as important, particularly the parents and the closer support structures of the child. All right? Then, do they feel they belong to the communities that they live in? And as we've already noticed, most of them actually have a strong sense of community belonging. But there were certain provinces that highlighted general levels of low community belonging, particularly Matabeleland South, which are the highest, Harare, and the Midlands. Now, in the case of Matabeleland South, we argue that it is because of the migratory problems. There were challenges that we noted in aspects of identity in Matabeleland South. We argued, though maybe with some people disagree, it's good anyway for disagreements. We argued that there's a significant part of the population that felt South African, a significant part of the population that felt Tswana. Also points to the challenges in the national project. And they need to try and make these people understand who they are and where they belong. So we thought that failure to link with the community in those particular provinces was mostly due to that, and to a certain extent, due to historical challenges that we've experienced as a country. Politically, sometimes through violence, sometimes through perceived and actual marginalization. All right? One before. So, there should be one before this. Isn't there a slide before this one that I'm not? Oh, okay, all right. Next one. Then we'll try to look at the community activities that generally young Zimbabweans are most interested in. So the youth said, many of the youth participants in community activities, many of the youth participate in community activities with the hope that they can be noticed and maybe get a job or something that could give us money. So we highlighted this quote because we found it very interesting. We were not sure whether the pursuit of financial reward or employment was the best motivator for participation. We were worried that it was a bit short of the ideal which deals with passion and wanting to do something and so on. We thought maybe it was something that was worth considering. Do we still have people who do things that they love? Do we still have young people who do things because they find them interesting and who are not necessarily always motivated by money, motivated by recognition, and so on and so on and so on? So we thought it was critical to look at that. But what is it that they really love the most? So we looked at the qualitative data that we had. We put it through in vivo and we developed a word cloud to show what most Zimbabwean young people generally talk about. And what you see standing out in the big words there is what is critical to them. And what comes out the most, for me, or rather, was none, which I found very strange. Most young people seem not to be interested in anything at all, though there was a significant number that dealt with aspects of religion, particularly church, Christianity, and there was a lot of love for sport. You'll notice that sport features a lot, and there were aspects, particularly soccer, and there were a few ideas of education and the community. But there is a significant group of young Zimbabweans who are not interested in anything at all. I think that is a challenge. That points to issues of ability to package and sell our culture, to entertain, and to tell our story. So we thought in the report you'll see that we made an argument where we said maybe we need to tell our story better. We need to find ways of telling our story such that it resonates with particularly those that say there is nothing for them. All right. Now, aspirations, particularly, what is it that they are scared of the most in the future, young Zimbabweans? And I think as I speak of this, I should be saying, what is it that we are scared of? Because I think I still fall in that bracket. So, the greatest thing that Zimbabweans worry about the most is financial insecurity in the future. They are afraid of not having adequate financial resources to do what it is that they want. I think this is directly related to the malfunctioning economy that I spoke of earlier. And related to this is the failure to achieve and realize their dreams. These are the two fundamental aspects or issues that worry them the most. So they think that they're not going to be financially secure in the future, and because of this, they're not going to be able to achieve their dreams. But looking at that table, you'll notice that there are certain things that they're not worried about. They're not worried about violence. They're not worried about death. They're not worried about other social ills that most societies would be worried about. That actually paints a very good picture about our society. So the anecdotal evidence that keeps on saying we're a peaceful nation and so on is generally supported by that perspective. People do not think they'll wake up dead tomorrow. It is not something that a young person generally wakes up and thinks of. They are more likely to think of, where am I going to get my next dollar? That is what they say generally. So the financial insecurity I've already highlighted is mostly related to the economy, but the other aspects relate to the positive society that I think our forefathers and the older generation created for us. Okay, then regarding perspectives of the future, we also thought, okay, to not only tell us that you are financially insecure, what is it that you think at least is likely to be positive in the country going forward? So we developed a rating scale between 1 and 5, where we asked each young person to score. So if it is 1 and 5, if we take all the responses and we compute them and find a mean, the mean or the average between 1 and 5 is around 2.5. So anything that had a score beyond 2.5 signified that most people were generally positive about that particular aspect. Now, as you can see, almost nothing has anything close to 2.5 there. Most young people do not think living conditions are going to improve. They do not think the employment situation is going to improve. They think there is a slight chance that access to higher education and skills will improve. They don't think corruption will be stopped. They don't think crime will change. They don't think there will be any change in violence. They don't think the inequality gap is going to change. But they think access to technology is going to improve. Now, I'm not sure if this is directly related to the global nature of technology, because technology generally is accessible to almost everyone because of its ubiquitous nature from a global perspective. They do not think, well, with health and life expectancy, even though it is below 2.5, there is a general positive perspective about it. the role of women, there's also a positive perspective about it, which I think was a good thing. It points to some of the policies and activities that have been undertaken in our society to equalize and bring the woman to the same level as the man. And also the role of the youth, also quite positive. And aspects of ethnicity are generally not a big worry. It was also positive. Positive, but not at the very top, just above average for almost everything. But interestingly, despite this, on the next slide, you'll notice that when we ask them, what are your perspectives over the next 5 years? Do you think overall everything is going to be better, worse, or remain the same? Despite saying those things from a generally negative perspective, most of them, particularly 18 to 24, are upbeat about things. They believe things are going to be better. Interesting. And the older you get, apparently, the more doom and gloom you think. Because, wait, can you go back to the slide? So you'll notice that those of us who are now leaving the youth category generally seem to be more pessimistic than the 2000s. They're upbeat about things and they seem to be able to do much more, and they generally believe that the next 5 years are going to be much better than what we said. So despite the pessimism that I showed in the previous slide, you'll notice that even in the report, we noted that the young people maybe carry our hopes more than everyone else. Right, next one. Then, so what is it that worries them? What are the challenges that they generally seem to face? The biggest challenge that young people face, regardless of age group, you'll see the tall bar there, unemployment. We've already spoken of unemployment. And again, related to the issues that they fear the most, they've got issues of financial insecurity. Then you'll find interesting ideas related to aspects of the failure to get a good education, and so on, related there. But the main challenge which they talk about is unemployment and financial insecurity. Next slide, please. So, what do they think about the solutions that should come through? So we need support to start our own things. It is clear that we'll not get employment anytime soon, but at least we can get support to start our own businesses. That would help a lot. That's one young person. Nothing for us without us. We need to be involved in the policy making process so that we can own the end result and also be part of it, and will speak for it, and it will speak directly to our needs. That's what they feel. So here, what we noted was, particularly in the case of unemployment, I've already discussed the difference between informal employment and informal enterprise. There was a strong drive of entrepreneurship, but there was very limited understanding of the psychology of the entrepreneur. What does it take to be an entrepreneur? How to become an entrepreneur? And so on and so on. So in the report, we highlighted that it is necessary to try and build these skills. It is necessary to push people to understand these skills. We also noted something that I think we were questioned a lot by the British Council about this, the challenges of the millennial generation. We argued that us, as young people, have a challenge, which is a bit of a bother, where we have lost the ability to wait. We've lost the ability to wait, and we've lost the ability to persevere, and we've lost the ability to be patient. This, in most literature, is attributed to the millennial instant behavior, mostly driven by social media, Facebook, and so on, where we are so worried about a friend who we saw standing next to a beautiful car without even asking if it is theirs, and suddenly we are under so much pressure to do the same. So that has limited our ability to wait. It has limited our ability to persevere, and we tend to want everything instantly, which is totally against the general principles of entrepreneurship. So we argue that it is critical for young people to learn to persevere, to try to understand that things are grown step by step, and hopefully in future programming by big agencies such as the British Council, they'll instill such ideas in young people. All right, next slide. So we had a lot of recommendations, as the Honorable Minister has already said, but we just picked a few because I was worried that if I gave all of them, you'd not read the report. So, now, what do young people think? Young people explain that, as I've already said, education quality favors the urban areas. They want to see better education even in the rural areas. They want to see better education for everyone regardless of location. They also said the chances of obtaining tertiary education were very low in the rural areas. They were very low, particularly for women, especially those who were exposed to the challenges of teenage pregnancy, early pregnancy, and economic challenges that forced them to get married. So they really thought it is critical for authorities to pay attention to that. Young people felt more could be done on the employment opportunities. They thought not much was being done to employ them. They even argued that it's not everyone who can be an entrepreneur. Some people need to be employed, it's particularly the younger ones. And they were not getting these opportunities, and they felt there was need to do more on this. They also told us that they felt a lot was going wrong in the national economy, and that things had gotten worse since the new dispensation. And some explained that they were worried about their future, particularly financial security and the ability to earn a living. In this light, they advocated for less politics in the national economy and requested more opportunities in entrepreneurship from a national perspective. I'm glad the Youth Empower people are here as well to hear that. Then, I think this is the final slide. And I want to thank all Zimbabweans, young Zimbabweans, who allowed us to capture this strong, powerful story and put it into this beautiful report which has been packaged by the British Council. Before I say thank you very much, I want you to listen to a quick clip that we compiled from the different, we had enumerators in the whole country, so we selected a few and asked them to tell us what they generally thought about the young people they spoke to. Okay, so take it away. He's also a young person. Huh? Stop playing. Oh. Oh well, I don't know if he's got an option, but we had prepared a clip so at least things are usually better synthesized and understood through not only listening to one boring person speak, but through some audio-visual combination as well. I hope they'll be able to put it up, but I wanted to say the thank you after the clip. I don't know if I have to say it now. Would you give us 2 minutes to try and sort it out, Charlton?
Yeah, sure. We'll still run it, because we're going to open up the Q&A.
Okay.
Yeah, so once they're ready, we can then actually just launch it.
All right, okay. Young Zimbabweans, thank you very much. It was a great story.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. What amazing, amazing work that you guys did. Please help me just appreciate Ali Douglas one more time. The team has done amazing work. Another warm round of applause. Very, very interesting work. And at this particular point in time, I want to be able to open up for questions, for points of clarification, or for comments. Yeah? So that maybe if you want to follow up and hear a few more things from the researchers, our team is here. I find it fascinating, just the whole concept, the inclination towards entrepreneurship. Young people in Zimbabwe appreciating their reality. Young people in Zimbabwe appreciating the dynamics in the economy, but more so, for me, wanting them to take up that agency to say, no, look, we should be able to create our own jobs. We want to move and create our own jobs and all of that. And so I think it's quite interesting. I heard some very interesting saying, it's been in the past couple of days into weeks. Someone was speaking to young people in Zimbabwe, talking about how encouraging young people to go to university and college, go and get that degree, graduate, and thereafter hustle like you never went to school. I thought that was very, very interesting. On one end, of course, the idea is to make sure that the education that we're acquiring also adds value to whatever other even entrepreneurial endeavors. But for me, what was very interesting is just to get young people to then say, even beyond graduating, we still need to be proactive in creating new jobs. Because we've got 300,000 young graduates who are coming into the economy every year. And we need more employers. I always argue whenever I speak to young people, I say we need more employers. Of course, notwithstanding the difficulties in the economy and everything, but that mindset, I think it's a very powerful mindset. I also got caught on issues around identity as well. Issues of identity and diversity. I think this is a conversation that we also need to continue having in Zimbabwe, not just among the younger generations, but for all of us as well. I found it very fascinating. One of the things they were able to do in this study was to also pull out young Zimbabweans from other races. This has been one of the most difficult things to do in this country. You're trying to do a youth study, get young people from the Indian community to come in, and this has been very difficult. But this study has actually been able to do that very well, and congratulations for that. And I was just trying to get back to the issue of identity, to say even as we are moving forward, we need a proper national conversation around issues of what it is to be Zimbabwean, who we are as Zimbabwean. If you travel quite a bit, you see people in national dresses, national colors, they identify with national food, and all that kind of thing. At what point are we also going to have these discussions? At what point do we have convergence around what our identity is, and also just embracing the various forms of diversity we have as Zimbabweans? That was also quite striking for me. And my last one, before I open up the discussion, I liked the way you colleagues really worked hard to try and separate young people between the millennials and the Generation Z or the Generation Z, depending on where you went to high school. So for me, this is also interesting because do we know the difference between the millennials and the Generation Z? Do you know the difference? So your millennials are your youth like myself, believe it or not. No, wait. What I'm talking about are those young people who pretty much born from about 1981 into the mid-90s, 95, 96, thereabout. So that generation of millennials now, they're in their 37s, 38, and they've actually left then the youth bracket, as it were. And then the Generation Z, it's the new energy that is coming from the 1997s. Into the 2000s, and it's quite interesting because now you're talking about issues of patience, wanting things now, because with smartphones, things are happening there and then. Emails, we used to write letters. Okay, it makes me sound very old, but these are some of the realities even among young people. And so the aspirations and the desires of these different groups of young people are also quite different in what drives them and their perspective into the future. So this was also great that the study went quite empirically into that. So well done for this great work. At this particular point in time, I want to be able to open a round of questions. And so make it short, sweet, and to the point. Please don't thank the presenters. We'll thank them ourselves. Okay, so that we save time. Can I have some roving microphones? Let me have guys with roving mics. I see there's one gentleman over there. Thank you very much. Maybe you could also just quickly introduce yourself or which organization you're coming from, and then you could... yeah.
My name is Zikamai from Zim Rights. I think this report brings us to a very important but very sad conversation. Yeah. And my immediate reaction, I think, is that I feel very sad at what we have done to each other and to our young people, particularly when you look at the very fact that such a huge majority of young people are out of employment, and they are worried about their future, and they are disengaging from the national project. Yeah. I think one of the areas that I wanted to highlight, and also perhaps to get from the team, if they had an interaction with that, I think the aspects of vulnerabilities. Yeah. We are a country with 4.5 million people in the diaspora. Yeah. I wonder if the research also did interact with the diaspora community. But I think what that says to me is that our home is no longer that homeless.
Zikamai,
Yes,
would you be able to stand so that you can also just be live right now?
Yes.
Thank you.
So I was mainly worried about the state of vulnerability of our young people. Yeah. And particularly looking at the fact that about 4.5 million of Zimbabweans are in the diaspora, meaning to say our home is not so homely. Yeah. But I wanted to get some response from the research team. Yeah. If they had an interaction with young people's experience of violence, because we're talking about the transition. If they had an interaction with young people about their experience of violence, either as perpetrators or as victims. That's my first worry that I think perhaps the team can respond to. My second one is the assumption that because people are not talking about that they are afraid of financial insecurity and not that they are afraid of violence. The assumption that it means we are in a peaceful country. Have you thought that probably they are afraid of talking about violence because of the legacy of state violence? Okay. The legacy of state violence and its impact on young people's ability to express their opinions about that interaction with violence. I think those are my questions.
Thank you very much, Zikamai. It's quite interesting, I think, even from what you was raising, just thinking of even young people in the diaspora as well. Could this have been part of our sampling frame, or we're just a lot more inward looking? Thank you so much for that. I'll take another question and point of clarification right over there. And while this is happening, we'll have another one there. Just to say also, Zikamai, it's amazing. He's a young man, and he has just ascended to being director of Zim Rights, over 300,000 beneficiaries of their programs in the country. So it's exciting that young people are beginning to take up all these spaces, and this is what we need more of. Thank you very much. Yes, so, yeah.
Yes, okay, thank you. My name is Pitbull, and I'm coming from the United States Agency for International Development. I guess my comment is that, as what the Honorable Minister said, I feel like the report has not really provided us with solutions coming from the young people. For example, when the young people are saying we need help to do our own businesses, yeah. I would have loved to see a young person in Lupani saying there are opportunities to do X, Y, Z. A young person in Bedford saying there are opportunities to do this, so that we, as actors also in the development space, can know the solutions and the opportunities that exist in the micro or localities where young people are staying.
Thank you very much. I think it's a very important submission. Probably I'll also be able maybe to bounce it back to one of the colleagues also from the British Council around just the thinking around on issues. I think this is very interesting, especially coming from potential supporters of youth programs and youth interventions. Solution, practice oriented, very, very practical. The researchers will respond to the first bit around the recommendations, and then we can maybe take it further from that. I'm sure the doctors have noted that. There was a young lady over there before I come to Honorable Minister, and then, oh, okay, right. Yes, sir. Is your mic working?
On now.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay. Thank you very much. My name is William Mataranyika from Higher Life Foundation. I totally agree with the presenters on Zimbabwe as being very much focused on academics and training from the neck upwards. But my question is, looking at the fact that the older generations themselves were trained from the neck up. So when you were looking at support from the community, did you further interrogate what support you also need to give to the older generations to be able to better support the younger generations in terms of career path choices? because I think if you look at other studies like the skills survey report which was released, it clearly shows where we have got lots of gaps, and yet a lot of Zimbabweans just go through the academic route, which does not benefit them and the nation at large.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether you did more interrogation along the lines of how best can the older generation support the younger generations to pursue other options which are not merely academic and will not benefit them, but serve to frustrate them and bring disbelief in themselves because they'll be following a route which they're not wired for. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I know High Life is very keen on these kinds of conversations, and thank you so much for joining us. Maybe we can come down to Honorable Minister, and then there were two young ladies. Maybe in this, yes, can I pick up on the two young ladies after the Honorable Minister, and then I can revert to the researchers, then we'll quickly take another round. So, yeah, let's have one mic that comes right up here. Yes, and then thereafter, the young lady over there, and, okay, no, even this one.
Thank you. So firstly, just to correct, I think our colleague from the US Embassy, I said that the report was a good report because it does have the recommendations of what to do and it does have some solutions. My questions are on figure 9, I think it's page 22, I wanted to know what caused that jump in the formal and informal employment from the 18 to 24 up to the 25-30 category mainly. Was it just opportunities? Was it entrepreneurship? Was it a mindset? Why did we suddenly see that increase in those job and informal? Then my next question is on 73. One of the future aspirations and challenges you're talking about for government to become politically impartially and in creating opportunities, which I fully agree with. But I also wondered if there were any recommendations of how to do that and what exactly, what opportunities were young people looking for from government. I'm a firm believer that as government, I might be in the minority, but I don't believe that we create jobs. I believe that we create an environment to facilitate companies and NGOs, etc., to grow. So I wondered if you had any of those conversations with young people on what were those opportunities that they wanted government to create. I just want to understand that a bit better. And how would, or during your conversations or during the compiling of the report, did you guys have any conversation around how to re-engage young people in the national drive? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. So let me have a young lady there and then the other one over there. Over to you, and then we get the researchers to respond.
My name is Oxy, and I'm from Impanta, I wanted to ask about on the education aspect in teenage pregnancy. Did you have conversations with boys within the rural communities, and did you also explore how much traditions and culture influence that? Because I feel like a lot of the times we're focusing on empowering women, but maybe we're not raising boys' rights enough to be empowered women. So I just want to know if you focus on that as well.
Thank you very much. That's a very powerful one. Thank you so much. Yes, we'll take the last one for this round and allow them to respond before we overwhelm them, and then we'll come to another round.
Good morning. My name is Memory Mutsaka. I'm with the Embassy of Sweden. Thank you very much for the research. But my main reactions here is we have a lot of challenges. It's a more complicated challenge when we look at the results that we have here. For example, the young people, we are saying that we do not have a lot of confidence in the government, but at the same time, we are not interested in the elections. We are not interested in the voting. We are saying we do not have the confidence in the government, but a majority, a significant number of us are not even aware of what the youth policy is or the youth empowerment guidelines or policies are. So how do we move? How do we demand when we don't know what we are supposed to demand? I think there's a lot of complex issues when you really go through the report and you try to link the different aspects in the report. When people answer this question, but really don't indicate the interest in solving what they say is not the. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so let's just take one last one for this round. Bear with me.
One very quick question, Giles Entingnap from the British Embassy. It makes for quite sobering listening and reading, but I wondered if you might give me and the audience the brightest ray of light that's come out of this report. Thank you.
Give us hope, eh? Give us some encouragement, yeah? Okay, colleagues, over to you. I know a number of issues have been raised. So some of them were comments, some of them were questions. So over right back to you. So I'll then take another round and then we'll go for a break and we'll continue later on. The discussions are going to continue. We're also going to be having a panel. And so we'll escalate the conversations from there. But for now, let's have the colleagues responding and then we take it up from there.
Okay, thank you, Shelton. My name is Mkokeli Stole, researcher at Ali Douglas. I will try and answer some of the questions, then Dube will assist me. But I will start with the issue of violence that was asked by the gentleman over there. Violence really was at the center of the youth's feeling of disillusionment about this lovely country. And this violence is mainly, I should say, the youth feel like they are being used by different political parties in the country, and the main political party and even the opposition, they are being used and then thrown away. Right? So from across all the provinces in the country, violence is at the center of the youth's disillusionment. So as a result of that, you find a lot of our youth now, they have developed this apathy to politics because of this general feeling of being used. But at the same time, there is this perception by our youth that in order to achieve something, to gain something in this country, you have to be seen to be associated with this political party or that political party. So at the end of the day, you find they are caught in between, whether to be part of this violence or not to be part of this violence. Because there's this perception that is there, that if you are part of this group that is maybe perpetuating this, you can benefit in A, B, C, D, or E. Right? So those who are not part of that particular group, there's this perception that you don't get anything in life. Right? So our youth are caught in that kind of scenario. Right? So those are some of the experiences that we noticed about our youth, and this is mainly in our rural spaces. Right? It is deeply entrenched in our rural spaces where our youth are being used by people from different political divides. Right. Then I think I missed some of the questions. On what support should be given what support should we give to the old generations in order to support the young generations? While this study was mainly focused on the youth, trying to get the perceptions of the youth, etc., we did indeed ask one or two, or talk to one or two old people. And the general feeling is that in order for the old generation to be capacitated to support the youth. Maybe there is need for, what should I say, for the old generation, at least to create some space for the youth also to participate in the economic development of the country, right? There was, maybe it's because we were moving from the old dispensation to the new dispensation, there was a general feeling that maybe some of our old colleagues in different fields, they should leave some of these spaces for the young people to come through. So many of our youth were comparing our country, our society to neighboring societies, neighboring countries, and pointing out that, maybe in South Africa we've got so many of young people in these positions, maybe in Botswana we've got so many young people in these positions. Maybe one way in which we can support our older generation is to at least ask them to relieve some of these responsibilities and groom the young people to come through. Maybe that can assist, and maybe that can bring some hope to our young people to at least see hope in this our beautiful country. What opportunities do they want the government to create? Right. The youth are generally aware that in this era, going to a university and getting employed has become very, very difficult, right? So what they yearn for is for the for the government or the authorities to create an environment where they can thrive, where they can be entrepreneurs, right? Where they can access, for example, financial resources to start to be engaged maybe in agriculture or in some of the economic activities, right? They are quite aware of that, right? In the rural communities, a lot of the youth were yearning for agricultural activities, to be involved in agricultural activities, but they noted that one of the major challenges is finance, right? They do not have the startup capital, right, to start agricultural activities and also mining activities, right? On the mining activities, which were really quite, a major issue for our rural youth. Yes, they noted that there are so many mining claims around. Yes, they noted that, they are able bodies, they can dig, etc. But they noted that it is very, very difficult for them to access these claims, to access these mines, right? So those are some of the spaces that they noted or they highlighted that the government can create for them to at least be economically active and to be entrepreneurs in this country. How do we engage the government in the national drive? I don't know, Dube, maybe you can take this.
All right, thank you very much, Stwale. Maybe I'll talk to the national drive in a bit. I think maybe first, just to add on to what Stwale said, in aspects of violence, we had a lot of discussions regarding the looting that took place earlier on this year, the violence that was characterizing earlier on last year. And in the report, there's also a lot of discussion around violence from different groups in Zimbabwe. I think there's I'm not sure of the page, but there's a quotation of a youth of European descent talking about violence that still haunts, is it him or her, from the land reform program, or something like that. So we did discuss the locus of violence quite deeply. I think you raised a very important point, which we also discussed about the youth in the diaspora. Initially, I think British Council, remember, our sample had that group, but we had serious challenges, first of all, in verifying that this person has lived in Zimbabwe, understands what's happening in Zimbabwe, and if at all, they'll give representative data. But I think it is a constituency that should be considered in future work to understand how Zimbabweans outside Zimbabwe perceive Zimbabwe. I think that is something that could be dealt with in the future. I think the Honorable Minister has already highlighted that the recommendations are actually on page 76 on how to deal with the issues from my brother from USAID. And then going to the issue of how do we support the youth, Honorable Minister, I totally agree with you. It's not the duty of government to create jobs. Government should create an environment where jobs are possible. And one way which was highlighted, as Dr. Stoll has already highlighted, was the need for finances. But you'll notice in the report that we went on to say, but there are so many institutions that have been created by government to provide finances. Youth Empowerment Bank, so on and so on, and so many loans. And the youth, despite, I agree with memory, that they generally seem to be, I don't want to say ignorant, but they do not know much about the institutions in place to support them. But at the same time, even those that know have developed apathy towards those institutions because they argue that those institutions are highly tainted with political perspectives. So the assistance tends to go towards political lines and so on and so on. That is an allegation, true or false, I'm not sure, but this is what they feel. So despite the presence of those platforms, they're generally not used. So I think as what to do, we need to improve the ability or the availability of information regarding those platforms, and we need to depoliticize those platforms, if at all they are politicized. The 18 to 24 group, why it is less employed and there is a jump, it is mostly because most of them are still in school. Most of them are still in school. Most of them have not gathered the experience that would allow them to get gainful employment, and they do not have responsibilities that would push them towards employment. That is why you'll see the jump in the next group. Then the idea of talking to the boys as well, we actually did that. But this is highly related to the institution of Patriarch. I talked about the challenges that we noted in the institution of Patriarch. I remember, I think this is in the report as well, in one conversation that we had, one of the young men was saying, you should realize that boys are different from girls. It's not that they're more intelligent or they go to school more, but it's because they do not have a choice. When a boy is 18 years old, he cannot do anything else but go to school. If he thought about having a girlfriend, there's too much to think about around that. I need to take her out, I need money, I need this, I need that, and that. So I just better go to school and even stop thinking about it. But the girl is just there. And usually she's being taken out by the older guys who have gone to school and done all that, then they come and take her. So that is highly related to the institution of patriarchy, and I think we discussed that as well. So I don't know if it's really about how you raise the boys, but sometimes maybe it is related to the culture and the tradition that is around. So I think to deal with it, we really have to deal with the culture and the tradition. I totally support memory. There is very limited knowledge on the platforms that are available that actually support the youth. And then, what is the positive stuff? Zimbabwean young people are phenomenal. They want to do stuff. They want to work. They want to do so many things. But there is very, very limited support that they understand, that they have access to, and that they have received. I think that is what I would say. And they think the future is bright, by the way.
Okay, maybe just to add one or two things on education. The rural child, whether boy or girl, really does not have much support, whether from the government or from the civic organization, right? And they do not have much information about the world, right? So I think we really need to assist these young people, right? To also have those dreams that an urban child has, right? It is only a few that come through the system, a few that end up in the big cities, Bulawayo, Harare, and being big people, but the majority of them really up to O level, that's it. And there is really need for support across. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please help me appreciate our two esteemed scholars.
We'll continue the conversations because we're going to be having a brief panel, and then we'll open up the plenary one more time for discussion. So it's exciting that young people have a positive outlook, and I think that's very positive. It's something that we can also carry and we can also take home. And among the last points you're speaking about, we've got practitioners, we've got funders. There I am just thinking of reimagining rural, just thinking of the young person in Binga. Can that young person be empowered? Does that young person matter? If they do, what sort of thinking do we have in terms of interventions that go out of Harare, Bulawayo, Mutare, Mashingo, or the main capitals? So I thought this was also quite strong on issues of center bias. When we talk young people, we think urban areas, but we've got even more young people within rural areas. So that's also very, very strong. Thank you very much, colleagues. We want to continue these discussions after tea break, but at this point I wanted to kindly invite you that we take a short break. How many minutes?
My name is Wami Ngomazana from Bulawayo, Zimbabwe. What it means to me to be a young person in Zimbabwe at this time is that there's a lot of pressure on me to excel despite the odds. It means that I'm very anxious and frustrated about my future. But because I'm young, it means that I'm still very hopeful that better circumstances and opportunities will emerge. What I love about my generation is that we're trendsetters. We're very aware of the things that are happening all around us, and we're exposed to them, and because of that we are very much ready to take them up to develop ourselves, our communities, and Zimbabwe. I'd like to see my generation have a mindset shift, an attitude shift. We have been very disheartened by the things that are happening around us. I'd like to see us encourage ourselves to be proactive again in shaping our futures, so that our time here is improved, but also so that the generations that follow us have an example of what it means to take up space and stand up for what you want and work for the outcomes that you wish to see in your life and in the country.
Hi everyone, my name is Juliana Kariri from Harare, Zimbabwe. What does it mean to be a young person in Zimbabwe today? It means I'm the untapped energy that needs to be harnessed. 3 things I think are positive within our generation are that we are the key to Zimbabwe's prosperity, we are resilient, and we are innovative young generation. 3 things I also think are negative within our generation are that it's said that we've been forced into a lot of crime and delinquency. There's a lot of sensing of entitlement, wanting to be spoon-fed, and that there's also a lot of apathy. Thank you.
My name is Wami Ngomazana from Bulawayo, Zimbabwe. What it means to me to be a young person in Zimbabwe at this time.